This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, and this is episode 819 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, sponsored by FanDuel. Thanks for tuning in. Before getting into the trends this week, I'm going to do what I did last week and ask for a favor. If this show has helped you out in the past, if you listen to it and you enjoy it, do me a favor and leave a rating and review. Apple Podcasts is usually best for it, but it really helps the show grow. So that's my call to action to kick off today's show. Hit pause and leave a rating and review. And then enjoy the 10 trends that I'm about to throw into your brain. Trend 1 this week is about Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints. I actually almost had Carr as one of the transactions for the 15 transaction show this week, because of two things. First is the schedule. Over their next 4 games, the Saints get the Jags, Colts, Bears, and Vikings. According to my adjusted fantasy points allowed numbers, the Jags are the 16th best matchup for quarterbacks. The Colts are 5th, the Bears are 6th, and the Vikings are 15th. So they're all average to plus matchups. But more related to this trend show is that the passing attack, it's set to see a little bit of regression. Based on Derek Carr's yardage total, he should have closer to 8 touchdowns rather than the 5 that he currently has. That plays into the fact that Carr's touchdown rate is just 2.5%. That's a career low. And that's a number that typically does regress. So I'm expecting the passing attack to look a little bit better statistically moving forward. Speaking of team touchdowns, did you know that the Broncos currently sit with a pass-to-rush touchdown ratio of 12-1? They have 12 passing touchdowns this year to just 1 rushing touchdown. That's a passing touchdown rate of about 92%. Based on their overall pass rate, or how often they're throwing the ball, we should expect that number to be almost 25 percentage points lower than it currently is. So while I'm expecting the Saints' passing attack to look better, I think Denver's might lean the other direction moving forward. There was some evidence that Minnesota was going to start leaning into Cam Akers a little bit more in that backfield a couple of weeks ago. In weeks 4 and 5, Alexander Mattison had snap shares of 66% and then 53%. But in week 6, that number shot back up to 78%. He's not the sexiest running back in the world, but the running back position is an absolute disaster right now. So Madison's fine enough as an RB2. Zach Moss outsnapped Jonathan Taylor 49-10 during Taylor's return 2 weeks ago. In week 6, that gap shrunk. Moss had 37 snaps, Taylor was at 32. Taylor saw his route participation almost triple, which led to an 11.5% target share. Now, Moss was still getting better usage in week 6, but it's clear that week 7, it might be the week where we see these numbers flip, where they start to favor Jonathan Taylor a little bit more. Unfortunately, the Colts get the Browns. The Atlanta Falcons have seen more dropbacks than rush attempts in each of their last 4 games. They've been throwing the ball more. And when you compare that to 2022, it's pretty crazy. Because the Falcons last year, that happened just 3 times. They had more dropbacks than rush attempts only 3 times last season. On the year, Atlanta ranks 24th in pass rate. As we know, last season, their pass rate was historically low. So things have definitely bounced back, as we see happen each season in the NFL. And that's helped make some of these weapons in the passing attack more viable. Drake London in particular has seen back-to-back top 20 performances in PPR leagues. And he's averaged over 8 targets per game since that week 1 outing where he had just 1 target. This is why we shouldn't overreact to week 1 performances. Right, Calvin Ridley managers? Devontae Smith has been a low-key frustrating player for fantasy this year. After such a promising start to the season where he had back-to-back top 20 performances, Smith hasn't finished in the top 20 since then. And over his last 2, despite seeing 16 targets, he's combined for 11 PPR points. I'm concerned here, but I'm not overly concerned. The target shares haven't been horrendous. He's hit a 23% target share in 4 of 6 games. And one thing that I really like about Smith is the playoff schedule. The Eagles get the Seahawks, Giants, and Cardinals in the fantasy playoffs. So if you can buy low, I don't think that's a terrible idea. Quentin Johnston has yet to do anything in the NFL. Despite Mike Williams going down with a season-ending injury, QJ has caught 6 balls this year, and he failed to catch a pass in Week 6 against the Cowboys. Now, to be fair, Johnston's playing about half of LA's snaps right now. He's not a full-time player. And according to Fantasy Life's utilization report, just half of his targets have been deemed catchable. But Johnston also has a weak 15% targets per route run rate. And he's got by far the worst yards per route run rate on the Chargers at 0.54. In fact, among wide receivers with 10 or more targets this season, only Randall Cobb and Donovan Peoples-Jones have a worse yards per route run rate than Quentin Johnston. He was a volatile prospect entering the league. That's something that I talked about a lot during the offseason. It looks like that volatility is hitting on the bad side of his range of outcomes. Now, if you want some good news for the Chargers, look at Austin Ekeler. He returned from his ankle sprain in Week 6, and he ended up seeing 87.5% of the team's running back rushes and a 16.7% target share. Those are elite numbers. And that's actually a combination, that rush share and target share, that's a combination that Ekeler's only hit once during his entire career. That kind of usage is going to make him a high-end RB1 in fantasy this year. Without Justin Jefferson in the lineup this past week, the Vikings needed Jordan Addison and KJ Osborne to step up. Let's talk about Addison in particular here. He wasn't playing a ton in 2 wide receiver sets before this Justin Jefferson injury, but he did in Week 6. He actually ran a route on 100% of Kirk Cousins' dropbacks. That route participation was closer to 70 or 80% with Justin Jefferson. Now, it only led to a 17% target share, but that's good news for his potential without Jefferson. The last trend this week is that according to my adjusted fantasy points allowed numbers, the San Francisco 49ers wide receivers have faced the toughest schedule in the league so far. They've gone up against the Steelers, Rams, Cardinals, Giants, Cowboys, and Browns. Now, the Steelers are the best matchup for wide receivers in adjusted fantasy points allowed, but the Rams rank as the 29th best matchup. The Cardinals are 9th, the Giants are 20th, and then the Cowboys and Browns are 28th and 32nd respectively. What that means is they face 3 bottom 5 matchups for wide receivers across their first 6 games. That's what's bringing this number down in total. So a player like Brandon Ayuk, he's been crushing despite these opponents. And guess what? Moving forward, no team has easier matchups at the position. Brandon Ayuk is looking really, really good right now. That's it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you yet subscribe to the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter @LateRoundQB. Thanks for listening, everyone. I greatly appreciate it. I'll talk to you tomorrow with the weekly Sleeper Show.